This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp.
Kinder. Shock-a-doobie! Doubly shock-a-doobie! Pop swabble!
This sweet surprise-filled treat is illegal in the United States, and the reason is one you'd least expect. It's a criminal offence to carry one into the country, and it's all because of this liquid, a chemical that led to the biggest mass poisoning of the 20th century, killing over 100 people, mostly children. It all started in the early 1900s with a disease that was considered fatal at the time, until a new medicine was finally discovered. While it saved many lives, for some families, everything went wrong. So, what happened? June 1937. Until now, the medicine was only available in powder and pill form, but parents began requesting a liquid version in order to give it to children, and a man by the name of Harold Cole Watkins made this possible. As a chief chemist and pharmacist, he discovered a way to dissolve the medicine from its original form into a liquid. Soon, over 240 gallons of his new elixir would be sent all over the country to save children. Instead, it would cause one of the deadliest mass poisonings of the 20th century. October 11, 1937. Less than a month after the elixir was dispatched throughout America, reports began, starting with the deaths of 8 children and 1 adult in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The AMA were quick to identify the elixir as the culprit. It had been tested for flavor, appearance, and fragrance, but not for safety. At the time, it was not mandatory for companies to test their products for toxicity. Harold had unknowingly used a deadly poison to dissolve the medicine into its liquid form, and people were now willingly drinking it. The mother of a child who passed away due to the drug wrote this in a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. "The first time I ever had occasion to call in a doctor for Joan, and she was given an elixir of sulfanilamide. All that is left to us is the caring for her little grave. Even the memory of her is mixed with sorrow, for we can see her little body tossing to and fro and hear that little voice screaming with pain, and it seems as though it would drive me insane. It is my plea that you will take steps to prevent such sales of drugs that will take little lives and leave such suffering behind and such a bleak outlook on the future as I have tonight." Before getting into the next part of the story, we'd like to thank our sponsor BetterHelp. We know life can get overwhelming, and often the best way to keep moving forward is to speak with someone who has the proper tools and can listen with understanding and compassion. That's where BetterHelp comes in. It is the world's largest therapy platform, making professional therapy accessible, affordable, and convenient. This is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. Regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human who lives in this world who is going through a hard time, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. We know how expensive and difficult it can be to get help, but BetterHelp makes it easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/hook and get 10% off your first month as a Hook subscriber. Immediately, they sent out a recall of the deadly remedy through the radio and newspapers. The FDA approached the company responsible and found that they had already sent out telegrams to 1,000 salesmen, pharmacists, and doctors. There was only one problem. The letters did not do the severity of the situation any justice. They simply requested the product be returned, but mentioned nothing of the lethal properties of the drug. making the notice easy to ignore by those who received it. So the FDA made them issue a second wave of warnings, this time stating, "Imperative you take up immediately all elixir sulfanilamide dispensed. Product may be dangerous to life. Return all stocks, our expense." But this too wasn't enough. 6 human beings, all of them my patients, one of them my best friend, are dead because they took medicine that I prescribed for them innocently, and to realize that that medicine, which I'd used for years in such cases, suddenly had become a deadly poison in its newest and most modern form, as recommended by a great and reputable pharmaceutical firm in Tennessee. Well, that realization has given me such days and nights of mental and spiritual agony as I did not believe a human being could undergo and survive. So, 239 FDA inspectors and chemists were dispatched to towns and cities across the United States to track down every single shipment of the drug. It was no small task, but in the end, out of the 240 gallons shipped nationally, 234 gallons and 1 pint of the elixir were retrieved. The rest that weren't accounted for were consumed by the 105 people who lost their lives. In total, 71 adults and 34 children died as a result of taking the prescribed medicine. The company responsible for the manufacturing of the medicine had this to say: "My chemists and I deeply regret the fatal results, but there was no error in the manufacture of the product. We have been supplying a legitimate professional demand and not once could have foreseen the unlooked for results. I do not feel that there was any responsibility on our part." But Harold did not agree. Breaking news. Reputable chemist Harold Cole Watkins was found dead in his kitchen. A single bullet hole through his heart. The cause of death? Suicide. He was 58 years old. So, what does all this have to do with the ban on Kinder Surprise eggs? At the time, it was not mandatory for companies to test their products for toxicity. The poisonous elixir caused the FDA to form a new law, the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act of 1938. This new act would require manufacturers to provide proof of safety, effectively ensuring nothing like this would be allowed to happen again. It wasn't just medicines that would be monitored going forward. And that is where these come in.
That's what I like about Kinder Surprise. It's 3 of the things children wish for most: a surprise, a toy, and a chocolate treat. It's 3 wishes that always come true.
60,000 Kinder Surprise eggs were seized in the year 2011 alone, each one coming up against a maximum fine of $2,500.
2 Seattle men found out the hard way the candy they bought in Canada is illegal here in the United States.
The 2 men, stunned and worried, made their way to the detention center. They couldn't believe what they had been told. They were given a card with the word Kinder written on it and pled their case to the officer.
Are you aware that Kinder eggs are illegal in the United States and carry a $2,500 fine per egg? And I actually laughed.
In section 402 of the FDCA, subsections 1 and 3, any non-nutritive object is forbidden from being embedded inside of or bared within any confectionery item. And for this reason alone, it is completely banned in the United States, thus launching a black market for the eggs, with an increase in the number of attempted egg smuggling in the months and weeks approaching the Easter holiday. Will Kinder Surprise eggs ever be allowed into the hands of Americans? People simply couldn't resist the idea of milky chocolate packaged with a toy. This led to Kinder pleading their case to have the ban overturned, because what they had done was simply not enough. From encasing the toys in a smaller capsule inside of the chocolate in order to keep the toy and the chocolate separate, to each Kinder Surprise carrying a lengthy warning insert, listing in many different languages the possible hazard that lay within. But what could they do to satisfy the FDA? In 2018, the American public was introduced to the Kinder Joy, an egg-shaped treat packaged in 2 sections. One filled with a white milky spread with 2 chocolate hazelnut balls, the other with a toy. With plastic linings and a small spoon placed in between the 2 sections, the Kinder Joy was able to work around the 1938 FDA law through the loophole of packaging. With the candy kept completely separate from the toy, it was legally allowed to be marketed and sold to Americans. Kinder was back in the hands of many American families, but to the rest of the world, it was something sinister. A 3-year-old girl in France had a small wheeled toy found inside of a Kinder Surprise lodged in her throat. Her grandfather was able to remove the toy from her airways, and firefighters were able to resuscitate her. Sadly, she slipped into a coma and passed away from brain damage after arriving at the hospital. And this wasn't an isolated incident. There have been at least 9 other deaths of children as a result of ingesting the toy found inside of Kinder Surprise eggs. Despite the efforts of the FDA, many lives are still at risk when it comes to this treat. The ban on the product continues today.